Hi everyone. There's still a few more people just joining now, so I'll give them a moment for the numbers to pop up, and then once we've stabilized, I'll get going. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us right at the start of the Urban Tree Festival. And yeah, big thanks to Sarah and Paul from the Urban Tree Festival for making all this happen. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and thanks for your enthusiasm to hear about what we've been doing on the Trees Outside Woodland project. It looks like we're leveling out now. So I'll get going. Like I was saying, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Tom. I work for the Tree Council, but we're joined by some other representatives of the Trees Outside Woodland project, which is a multi-organisational project, which you'll hear a little bit more about in a moment when I introduce it. But yeah, joining us today will be Louise Butfoy from Kent County Council, Sophie Hamnett from Chichester District Council, and Emma Cross from Norfolk County Council. And we'll just be sharing a little bit about what we've learned in the urban tree space through the Trees Outside Woodland project over the last 5 years. So, what we're going to hear today. First of all, I'll just run through a little bit about what the Trees Outside Woodland project is. Um, and then we'll move on to Louise, who will share a little bit about the Miyawaki method trials that went on as part of the project. She was the project officer leading on that, and we had some really exciting results that have resulted in multiple microforests, you could call them, being planted and established, more importantly, across the UK, in 5 local authority areas. Then you'll hear from Sophie, who tell us about some of the work that we've been doing in the tree giveaway space and community orchard space. And again, really amazing figures from that during in the tree giveaway pilot. 144,000 trees were planted across the UK, which is an amazing figure. And then we move on to Emma from Norfolk County Council, who will share a little bit about the pilot that she led on, which was community tree nurseries. Just this incredible army of mostly volunteers who are planting trees from seed, often collected within a 20-mile radius of the nursery, doing some amazing work, both in preserving and tree genetics and tree planting in our towns and cities, but also creating this wonderful social network for people who want to do something positive to help the environment. And then we'll move on to we've got about 10, 15 minutes for questions at the end. So if you could just put any questions you have in the Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end. So, Trees Outside Woodland. As you can see, these are some trees outside woodland. But what is the Trees Outside Woodland project? Well, it's a multi-organisational project that's run in partnership with local authorities, with the Tree Council, with DEFRA and some others. And we've been looking at, for the last 5 years or so, different ways and new funding models which we can use to plant more trees outside woodland in a local authority context. So, trees outside woodland, that some research that was done a couple of years ago has shown that there's actually a lot more trees outside woods that we thought in Great Britain. As you can see here, 3.2% of the whole land area of Britain, which actually makes up 20% of Britain's canopy cover. So these trees that are quite often overlooked in terms of planting strategy are forming this huge, huge part of our national treescape. And they're really important. They're those trees that we encounter every day, the trees that we encounter in our streets, in our parks, in our urban green spaces, our trees on farms, and even the trees in your garden are trees outside woods. So they've often been overlooked and neglected for quite a long time. We often hear that, especially in the urban tree space, that these trees are expensive and that they don't often survive. So it invites the question, is it worth the planting? Obviously, we say yes, absolutely. And as a result of this, there's less funding available and there's less research and evidence on how to establish these trees and on establishment rates. So our project, the Trees Outside Woodland project, it's a nearly a 5 million 5-year program of research, which is developing innovative and sustainable new ways to increase tree cover to both address the climate and ecological emergencies. Um, we've had 4 major pilots. We've been looking at how to plant more trees in towns and cities through the Miyawaki method, which you'll hear about today. How to increase the uptake and effectiveness of tree schemes, um, and how to increase tree planting on farms, which is something we won't talk about today, but is an amazing space which we've done some great work in, and how to develop more community tree nurseries, which again you'll hear about today. And it's been delivered in partnership with DEFRA, Natural England, Chichester District Council, Cornwall Council, Kent County Council, Norfolk County Council, Shropshire Council, and Fairer Science, and of course the Tree Council. And throughout the project, we have planted 265,000 trees, which is way more than we thought we might do at the beginning. We thought this was just a research project, and we're really, really proud that we've managed to get that many trees in the ground across the UK and in a non-woodland setting. So, with that, I'll pass over to Louise to tell you a little bit more about the Miyawaki trials that she's been doing in Kent.
And in Kent, we've been leading on the urban tree establishment trial. And specifically today, I'm going to be talking about our Miyawaki experiments. Next slide, please. So very quickly, this is a picture of our superstar plot in Parkwood, Maidstone in Kent. And I'll be going into detail about what we did here and across a number of other sites in this presentation. Next slide. So first of all, what is the Miyawaki method? So it was created by Professor Akira Miyawaki, pictured here. And he's a Japanese botanist, and he established this method in the 1970s, essentially as a way it's a woodland establishment and management technique, and it's now been used in Asia for over 50 years, mainly for environmental conservation. So the method has 5 main steps. The first is understanding your local potential natural vegetation. And potential natural vegetation is the vegetation that would be expected in a given environment if there was no human intervention. The second step is soil decompaction, and this is particularly important in urban areas. So the aim is to aerate the soil and make it nice and loose and fluffy. And then you want to add organic materials into the soil to increase the nutrient content. Then you densely plant a diverse mix of tree and shrub species which are suited to that specific area. And the idea is that the density increases the competition between the trees, making them grow a lot quicker, and also the cooperation between the species as well. And then you want to mulch and water the plot for the first 2 to 3 years whilst it establishes. And then after that point, it should become self-sustaining, which means that there's very little maintenance required for the landowner, which is particularly good for local authorities. So it's important to remember that the plot should remain chemical and fertilizer free. Next slide, please. So here's some pictures of the first plots that Professor Miyawaki planted at Yokohama National University in the 70s. So you can see if you go around clockwise, it's before planting, after planting. Then on the left, 3 years post planting, and then 10 years post planting. So he came up with this method to reconstruct indigenous woodlands on land that had previously been deforested or where the soil had been degraded. And this is often true for urban areas. And the aim is basically to give trees the best head start and to create the conditions for them which mostly resemble their natural woodland environment. So next slide, please. So this is a picture of the same plots taken in 2024, and actually I was lucky enough to visit this site in Japan last year. So you can see they look really good and healthy. So it's important to remember that this method was developed for the subtropical Japanese climate. So everything that's been done since then around the world is purely experimental, including what we've done here in the UK. Next slide, please. So how did we test the Miyawaki method? Um, so in October 2020, when we were first developing the Trees Outside Woodlands program, I came across a BBC podcast which was talking about European Miyawaki tiny forests planted in urban areas in the Netherlands, where they've been using the method now for over a decade. And at that time, the first plot was being planted in the UK in Oxfordshire. And I thought this looks really interesting. Maybe this is something we should test in the local authority context. So we decided to investigate it and find out whether it could be a cost effective and reliable way to establish urban trees and also to get the most out of their environmental services. So we wanted to compare the Miyawaki method with each local authority's typical planting method. So we planted 16 plots across Kent, Norfolk, Chichester, and Cornwall. Um, each plot is divided into two. So the Miyawaki method is on one side, 3 meter gap, and then the standard planting method on the other side. Um, and yeah, basically we wanted to experiment with a new approach because we'd seen it was working successfully elsewhere, so we wanted to try it for ourselves. The average size of each plot is 100 square meters, and they're all on public land and on sites where some planting had failed in the past. And we looked at the cost effectiveness, the success rate, the wider biodiversity, and the environmental benefits of the plot. Next slide, please. So the next few pictures are going to show the first plot we planted in this pilot, and this is in Parkwood in Kent. So you can see them digging the soil in the bottom right-hand side with a mini digger. So they lifted it up, fluffed it up, and then placed it back on site. And then we used this little grid in the top left to make sure we were planting really densely. So we did 3 to 5 trees per square meter. So this site was a building yard during the construction of the surrounding house and estate in the 1960s. So the soil was really compacted, and that's why we thought it would be a good place to test this experiment. Next slide, please. So this is the next few pictures are kind of a time lapse. So this is 7 months after planting, and you can see the comparison plot on the left and the Miyawaki plot on the right, and you can already see there's a bit of a difference between the height of the trees. And then there is an ancient woodland in the background that you can see there. Next slide, please. So this is 1 year, 2 months after planting, and the experts say that it's in the second year when the Miyawaki trees really do put on a lot of growth. Next slide. So 2 years, 3 months. It's already quite a big difference. Next slide. 2 years, 8 months. Next slide. 3 years, 6 months. So the comparison plot trees are also doing really well, but they're just not as tall as the Miyawaki ones. Next slide. And then this was taken 2 weekends ago. This is the most up-to-date picture we have. And every single time I see this plot, I'm always really blown away. Oh, and there's me for a height comparison of the trees. Next slide, please. So we've not just had success in Kent, we've had success in all the local authority areas. So this picture's a few years old now, but this is in Sprowston in Norfolk, with the Miyawaki on the left and the comparison on the right. And this was 1.5 years after first being planted. Next slide. And this is another site in Norfolk, Sheringham. Yeah, with the comparison on the left and Miyawaki on the right, and this is 2.5 years after being planted, and you can see the team actually in the plot. And I remember when we went to visit this, as soon as we walked in, loads of birds flew out of the Miyawaki, and the rest of the park was completely bare. So it really, really made a big difference to the site. Next slide, please. So we've been collecting data throughout this project and counting the number of dead trees, looking at which species have died and what the possible cause of death have been. So I'll talk you through some of the results we found now. So on the for the Miyawaki plots, all of the names are listed at the bottom. The average survival is 79%. which you can see on the right. And then for the comparison plots, the average survival after 3 years was 47%. And this was even achieved during the really bad drought in summer 2022. Next slide, please. And in terms of costs, so the bars here show the range of costs per tree across all of our plots 2 to 3 years after planting, with the Miyawaki on the right and the standard practice planting on the left. And the blue bars show the cost per planted tree, and the orange bars show the cost per survived tree. So the wider the box, the less predictable the cost per tree, and because there is such a range and spread of costs across the plots. So the Miyawaki plots demonstrate more consistency in costs because the box are much shorter, which means the costs are not as variable, which suggests that it's easier to predict how much it will cost to get a number of trees surviving in a Miyawaki plot in the first 3 years compared to our standard plots. So the average median cost per survived tree for the Miyawaki plot was around £10, whereas it was around £50 for our comparison plots. So initially, the cost to plant a Miyawaki is obviously much more expensive up front. The 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 delivery is much more intensive. You're using so many more trees. You have to decompact the soil. It's much more resource heavy. But because a high number of trees are planted in the same size area in the Miyawaki plots, the cost per planted tree was actually less than the controls. And also because a much higher proportion of these trees survived, it means it's more cost effective in both planting and survival over the first 3 years compared to our comparison plots. Next slide, please. So what conclusions can we draw from the initial research? So during this time, Miyawaki's become quite a hot topic. Our plot pictured here in Parkwood, the first one we planted in this project, was only the second one we were aware of in the whole country at the time. We didn't really know how well it would work out, and we didn't really have any preconceptions, but we wanted to try something new as a local authority because tree planting in urban areas often fails. Obviously, we're still collecting data, but we've learned that tree establishment can be done differently. And although it's expensive upfront, it is cost effective and a reliable establishment tool over the longer term. But we have faced some valid questions. Next slide. So people have asked us, will the trees grow thin and die and be all spindly because they're planted so closely together? What will it look like in 50 years? And we can only look to the older plots in Japan to see what it will look like in 50 years. And as you can see from that picture, they look okay. None of the plots in Europe are that old, so we don't really know what they'll be like in that period of time just yet. People also asked us whether the aeration would damage the soil biome. Would it release loads of carbon from the soil? Can we cut down on the costs because it's so expensive up front? So we decided to investigate a little bit further. We planted 16 more plots in the local authority areas, and this time, instead of having 2 comparisons, we had 5, which you can see pictured here in what I like to call our pizza plots. So we wanted to learn more about the process and understand why it was so successful in the first phase of our trials. And we wanted to find out whether elements of the method had the potential for other types of planting schemes. And also, what were the key drivers of success, and can the carbon cost and the cost efficiency be improved? So we look down deeper into the density, the decompaction methods, and the mulch application. Next slide, please. So the top picture, it is actually a circle, but it was taken using a kind of panoramic view, and the bottom one is a rectangle, but it's the same idea. So we're comparing 5 different types of decompaction here. These are both in Kent. So we did excavation, which is the traditional method that we've been using in the past, an auger, rotivating, no dig, and then our standard control plot to see whether, do you actually need to excavate using a mini digger, or could you save time and money by using a different method? Next slide, please. And then we also wanted to find out whether, as I said, what are the wider applications of the method. So we've tried the soil preparation on hedgerows, on street trees, and also on mini Miyawakis, which are pictured here with in Chichester. So we're still collecting data on this second phase of the trial, but we will hopefully share results on that soon. Next slide, please. So over the last 5 years, from our experience and everything that we've learned, we've created a range of resources which can all be found on the Tree Council website. We have the project report, which includes all the data analysis from the first few years of these trials. We have a case study, which is the Kent County Council experience and the steps we took to deliver these Miyawaki plots and our lessons learned. And then we also did a trees and utility study, which was looking into the interactions between trees and underground and overground utilities in the street scene, because often there can be conflicts between the two. And these links will be shared after these presentations. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the really bad drought in summer 22. And you can see the Miyawaki still looks good. They were both being watered the same amount, but the comparison plot is yellow. So to summarize what I've learned over the last 5 years doing these trials, although it's more expensive up front, the Miyawaki method is more cost effective over the longer term. It has low maintenance requirements, which are good for local authorities, and it has a high survival rate. It has been proven to be resilient to drought and also vandalism in our urban parks, which makes it a reliable route to tree establishment in difficult urban areas. And it makes an impressive instant impact. So in my view, it's worth considering trying a Miyawaki plot or even just certain elements of the method to give urban trees a really good head start. And now I will hand over to Sophie from Chichester.
Thank you very much, Louise. Hi everyone, I'm Sophie. I'm from Chichester District Council. So I'm going to chat to you this morning about the two different ways that we've been planting trees in urban areas. So firstly, by running tree schemes, which we ran between 2020 and 2023, and secondly, by planting community orchards, which we've been funding since 2020. Next slide, please, Tom. So firstly, tree schemes. So tree schemes are regularly used by local authorities, charities, and other organisations to facilitate tree planting. They could be really good ways of planting trees at scale, particularly in urban areas. However, at the moment, there's little evidence on the success of tree schemes in terms of tree survival. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to run this pilot to investigate these different types of tree schemes, and to find out whether, if we ask applicants to pay a proportion of the cost towards the trees, would it motivate them to look after the trees a little more, and therefore would the survival rate of these trees be higher than if we gave the trees away for free? We ran two schemes. We ran free tree schemes and subsidised tree schemes over 3 years across 4 local authorities in Chichester, Norfolk, Shropshire and Kent. It was a really interesting pilot to run. As Tom mentioned in his introduction, we planted nearly 145,000 trees in this pilot, which is an amazing number of trees. And really interestingly, we did find that when asking people to pay a proportion of the cost towards their trees, the survival rate, it did increase. Next slide, please, Tom. So for both tree schemes, we ran them in a very similar way so that we could compare them. We developed tree packs of between 10 and 125 bundles of whips, guards and canes. You can see on the left here an example of how the trees were bundled up into packs. Obviously, when they were delivered in bags and protected. This is just what they look like just before planting. So each local authority developed the tree packs depending on the local environment. So for example, in Chichester, we had a coastal pack and an urban pack, among others. And in Kent, they had an urban pack and a hedgerow pack, for example. It was really important to have that separate urban pack. These packs contained fewer numbers of trees, normally about 10, and also smaller species, kind of more suitable for the urban environment. The other thing we offered was for applicants in urban areas, we actually offered people the option to apply for one pack and then divide it. So you could apply for one pack and then divide it, say, between friends or neighbours. If you didn't have space for that 10, maybe you only had space for 2, but you knew 5 other people that also wanted, or 4 other people that also wanted to. Successful applicants collected the trees from us after the nursery had delivered to them, delivered the trees to us. And you can see on the right here, this is one of Chichester's collection days that we hosted in one of our car parks. Next slide, please. So each year following on from planting, we went to sites to assess the survival rate of, oh, thanks, Jackie. Apparently they're working to remove the grey box. Sorry about that. So yes, each year following planting, we went to assess the survival rate of the trees. Any sites that we couldn't get to in person, we also sent online survival monitoring forms. So alongside this, we collected a huge amount of additional data, such as land use before and after planting, cost to the applicants, cost to the local authority, planting data such as who planted the trees, how long it took to plant them, etc. And then also qualitative data, so applicants' experience of being part of the scheme. Next slide, please. So we had such a huge range of applicants, and it was, yeah, I'm just going to show some photos of a few. Some examples. We received, we had residents, schools, community groups, farmers, landowners, businesses, all planting in a really wide range of locations, all for a wide range of reasons, for kind of improving the environment, to screening, to helping wildlife, and so forth. Next slide. And just a couple more examples here. The vast majority of people were really enthusiastic to have us on site and chat about their trees and their aims for planting and so forth. And just a nice example on the right here. This was one resident who actually planted the trees in pots first to grow on slightly before planting them out in their garden. Next slide, please. So we had, we've shown that this pilot is a really great way of planting trees at scale. And apologies for the grey box, it's blocking out a little bit of the right-hand side of the screen. But in total, and the total is unfortunately blocked, but in total we planted 144,650 trees, which is absolutely amazing. And that was to 1,222 applicants. And there was quite a variation in the number of trees planted by local authority. So Chichester, yes, we planted fewer trees, but I think that's absolutely expected. We've got a much smaller population. And the other interesting thing to note was actually demand didn't taper off when asking applicants to pay that proportion of the cost towards their trees. There were similar numbers for the free and the subsidised scheme. The other amazing thing that we found was there was this absolutely huge appetite for this scheme. Sorry, just to pause. Tom, are you about to stop sharing and reshare? Sorry, to try and get rid of this grey box.
I'll just do that very quickly and see if I can get rid of it. Hold on.
Thanks. Sorry, folks.
That better?
It's not for me.
Okay.
But we
an unfortunate IT issue. I think we might have to live with it. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Yes, let's carry on. So yes, I was about to just mention that the uptake was huge, and the appetite for these trees was absolutely enormous. Louise in Kent had to turn away 80% of applicants because she was so oversubscribed for her trees, which is amazing. Next slide, please. So the research did find that the subsidised scheme, yes, it did have a lower cost per tree, but the cost for Survive Tree for both the tree schemes, free and the subsidised, were really low. So that's quite important, as it just shows that tree schemes are a really great way to plant high numbers of trees at low costs. So it cost us £3.59 per Survive Tree for the free tree scheme and £1.58 per Survive Tree for the subsidised scheme. And obviously this difference is driven firstly by half of the overall cost being met by the recipient, and secondly by the survival rate being higher. And yes, we did find that there was a higher survival rate for the subsidised scheme. Using the first years of data, we're still in the process of collecting data. As I said, every summer we go back and collect more. So using the first year, we have an average of an 88% survival rate for the subsidised scheme and an 83% survival rate for the free tree scheme. Next slide, please. So there were so many absolutely incredible sites and applicants. I just wanted to show a short video of Kingsham Primary School in Chichester. They're one of my absolute favourite sites, and this is just them talking about their experience of the tree scheme.
Kids love getting outdoors. They're so keen. They're really enthusiastic. They want to take care of things. They like getting outside into the environment. They know how important it is for us to have these extra trees to encourage wildlife, but also to extend our lovely forest area. Hi, I'm Mrs. Tarrant from Kingsham Primary School, and I'm the school's eco lead. School budgets aren't always very good, so we always look out for things that we can use within our school grounds. I met with Sophie, who come round and talked me through the process. She also discussed how we could use the trees in our area and how many we need. So it was quite a beneficial experience, and she was able to be hands-on and talk me through what was needed and how we could implement it on our site. We got the trees on a windy February morning, but we've already planned as a school. Children from each class were going to come out and help us plant them, and they got involved with the process, and we had a very jam-packed morning with the children coming out, helping us dig the holes, make sure everything was in order, getting them planted, watered, etc. We've had a few casualties, obviously, because of weather, but I would say on the whole, yeah, they've done pretty good. As a whole, we've done a really good job of looking after them, and and as we go forward, we're going to maintain that as well.
So really nice just to hear from Dawn there talking so enthusiastically about the scheme. Right, so next up, I'm going to briefly chat about community orchards as well. So this is another way we've been supporting urban tree planting. So we've funded community orchards both through the Trees Outside of Woodlands project and also the Coronation Living Heritage Fund, which was a 2-year fund launched in 2023. So community orchards they're an absolutely amazing community asset. They can produce fruit, fresh produce for local communities, and they can be really incredible little pockets of nature in the urban environment, and can really help bring communities together. They have planting days, pruning days, picking days. They can be really lovely to see. So we funded 20 community orchards since 2021, and lots of really interesting projects ranging in size from 5 all the way through to 60, and in lots of different locations as well. And I'm just going to share some examples of these. Next slide. So this is a school who planted 22 fruit trees across their whole site, so in little pockets of green space across the site. It was a mixed orchard with cherry, pear, plum and apple. Next slide, please. This is a community group who planted a community orchard of 14 trees in a kind of public amenity space just behind some tennis courts on your left. Next slide, please. And this is a really interesting site. This was a collaboration between a private estate and a parish council who worked together to plant a linear orchard alongside a public footpath. They planted 40 trees. And this is a really nice example because it just shows how to kind of use different spaces for community orchards, and they don't have to be a traditional shape. Next slide, please. And a couple of smaller examples. On the left, the City Council planted, or Chichester City Council, planted 10 fruit trees at one of their allotments. And on the right here, this is another really nice site. It's a really small little pocket of green space in some sheltered accommodation that the District Council own, where we planted a community orchard of 5 trees. Next slide, please. So across both the 2 funding schemes, we planted 341 trees at 20 different sites. which again is amazing. And the community orchards ranged in size, as you will have seen from those examples, and a really diverse range of organisations as well setting these up. So far, we've got a survival rate of 99%, which is absolutely brilliant. And as you would imagine, yes, the costs of setting up community orchards are quite high, and obviously they are much higher than the costs of setting up the trees and tree schemes, for example. But with such a high survival rate, they're really brilliant ways to plant trees. Average cost of trees per tree when setting up a community orchard we found was £34 per tree. This does include the tree, fencing, any mulch, any other tree protection, kind of watering tubes, that kind of thing. Although really interestingly, across the board, these costs ranged from about £19 all the way through to £260 per tree. So there is a huge range. Next slide, please. So whether you're already part of a group running a community orchard or you're interested in setting one up, there's loads of really good information out there, and there's lots of great websites and organisations. I've just listed a few here to get you started. The Brighton Permaculture Trust is one. They're a fantastic organisation based at Stamner Park, just outside of Brighton, and they run courses, they have events, and lots of great information online. Another organisation is PTS, so People's Trust for Endangered Species. And again, lots of great resources online. They also offer grants for orchards, so an interesting one to have a look at. They have this map on their website, which I've put a screenshot on the right here, and where they list thousands of traditional orchards all across the country. So a really useful resource. You can kind of zoom in and find your local orchard. The final one I mentioned is the Orchard Project. They've got a really useful section on their website where they actually list all the different grant funding options for orchards. Next slide, please. So I think for both of these tree schemes and community orchards, they're both really, really great ways of planting urban trees. Tree schemes, yes, they're really cost effective and efficient ways of planting trees. And although community orchards, they are a little bit more expensive, they've got that really high survival rate. They're both really great ways to reach a really wide range of applicants as well. So charities, got Woodland Trust, TCV, among others, local authorities and other organisations do quite often run tree schemes, and they also have funding for community orchards. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at both, as they could be really great ways to plant urban trees. Thank you very much. That's it from me, and I'm going to hand over to Emma.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. Hello, my name's Emma, and I've been very lucky to be leading a pilot as part of Trees Outside Woodlands, looking at community tree nurseries. So we've been gathering information about community tree nurseries and looking at ways to support them. And I'm hoping today to give you a bit of an insight into the wonderful world of communities growing trees. And hopefully along the way, I might inspire some of you to start growing some yourself as well. Next slide, please. So first up, what is a CTN? A community tree nursery, or CTN, is formed by a group of people who come together to grow, care for, and then give away or sell trees in their community. They can be really varied. So it could be, for example, a CTN in a school. It could be in a prison. They might have paid staff, or they might be entirely community-based. And it could be on just one site, or it could be a network of different people collectively growing trees, maybe all in their back gardens, and then coming together to collect seed and distribute trees. So they're really varied. As part of the pilot, we ran the first national survey of CTNs in autumn 2022 with Forest Research. We found there's about 80 community tree nurseries in the UK. Most of their stock is grown from seed, which is collected locally, and they are mainly growing native broadleaf trees. We also found at the time of the survey, most of them were fairly new, so 1 to 3 years old, and most of them had a desire to increase production as well. Next slide, please. So why did we want to look at community tree nurseries? There's been a big increase in tree planting, and community tree nurseries can make a valuable contribution to tree supply. They often also focus on harder to grow species, which it might be difficult to source commercially. So for example, in Norfolk, Shawlands Community Tree Nursery was set up to help conserve the rare native black poplar, which is one of the most endangered native timber trees in Britain. And they've been doing lots of work in identifying trees around Norfolk and then growing them on in the hope in the future the gene pool will be able to recover. As I mentioned, many CTNs grow from seed collected locally, which, although the forestry sector does have a lot of homegrown stock, there's also a lot of tree planting stock and also seed which is imported. So it's really fantastic that CTNs are collecting seed locally, which helps maintain local diversity. And this diversity can be really important with the threats that trees are facing. So, for example, in Norfolk, the John Innes Centre are doing lots of work at the moment to identify trees which are more resilient to ash dieback, and then they're growing on these trees from seed. And if you don't preserve that diversity and it's lost, then you lose some of that resilience to change. Community tree nurseries often encourage tree planting in local areas as well. So they're not just growing the trees often, they're supporting the trees once they're planted and encouraging people to plant in the first place. And aside from the tree planting, there's lots of other benefits around community tree nurseries, from volunteering outside around health, well-being and education. Next slide, please. So for the pilot, we wanted to look at different ways to support CTNs and tap into all these benefits. And one way we looked at this was through providing funding to new and established CTNs. So from 2021 to 2023, we distributed £148,000 to 24 CTNs, which included funding 16 brand new CTNs to be set up. Next slide, please. I mentioned CTNs are very diverse. So I just wanted to give 2 examples of different CTNs we funded. So this is Soul House Nursery here in Norfolk, and it's managed by James Cleaver, who's pictured here on the right. He runs open volunteering sessions on Sunday, and he runs the CTN in amongst working full-time as well. He has 2 sites. So this is his site at his home, where he's growing trees in his back garden, which are cell-grown trees, so they're kind of small pots and compost. And so, yeah, this is his seed store on the left. And then the next slide shows his other site, which is a local farm where he's growing bare root trees in the ground. So yeah, we've provided just under £300 worth of funding to James to help him protect his trees. Yeah, and he gives his trees away for free. And he does a lot of extra work around this. So he will, for example, go to a village hall, draw up a planting plan, provide the trees and organise volunteers to plant them. And many CTNs are like this. They're a lot more involved than just growing the trees in the nursery. It's the whole establishment journey, from finding places to plant to the aftercare to ensure the trees thrive. And this aftercare element is particularly important for urban trees. Next slide, please. So Bolgan is a new community tree nursery in Cornwall, and we've provided £20,000 worth of grant funding for equipment and specialist advice to set up, and also for biosecurity. This nursery is set up particularly to work with vulnerable adults dealing with addiction issues and help them develop transferable skills. Next slide, please. So I've just got a short video here of the nursery just to give you an idea of it.
Bolgan Community Tree Nursery was originally set up by Roger and Mark. They then brought on Adam, so we've got now 3 directors, and their vision really was to help with the climate emergency, also to help with the sort of community aspects of things. So it's very much a 50-50 situation here. We work with lots of different community groups and individuals. We've had remarkable benefits, some that we weren't expecting. Obviously, we are thrilled that we've collected over last autumn, we collected 250,000 seed, then seeing those germinate, turning into seedlings and then growing into little trees that's just a joy in itself. So we work with people at Job Centre Plus, we work with St Petrock's Homeless Charity, we work with lots of different groups and individuals who just want to come along, and they may be part of a social prescribing group, they may just have a wish to spend some more time outdoors. It's been a real joy getting it off the ground. It's been a real joining of community coming together. People can feel quite hopeless with the climate emergency, and this makes people feel quite calm and actually like they're doing something to help.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I think it's really nice to hear that directly from a CTN, especially around the wider benefits they've seen from running the nursery. And the benefits of kind of people being able to take some action in the face of climate change. So I also wanted to say a bit about the support and guidance available for CTNs, so that if you're feeling inspired to start growing trees, you know somewhere to start. So the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative is a great place to begin. A community interest company called the Fellowship of the Trees had the idea to set up a peer-to-peer support network, and we've been providing funding for a part-time coordinator. So network's gone from strength to strength. So there's 62 community tree nurseries which are members at the moment, and they have monthly webinars on a range of things from like biochar to how to set up a community tree nursery. And all the recordings of these are available on their website. They've also got a really active Facebook group where you can ask questions on all things tree growing. And so it's also, yeah, a good place to have a look if you are interested in kind of finding your local CTN and maybe getting involved with them as well. So yeah, next slide, please. Another source of guidance is the Tree Growers Guide, which is written guidance for CTNs, which we developed in collaboration with the Tree Council, More Trees and Forest for Cornwall. So as part of the guidance, there's over 80 species covered, and it goes from kind of identification to how to gather and process seeds, so yeah, and then how to grow them. And it's, yeah, really interesting because it's very variable for different species. So for example, something like oak, it's quite fairly easy. If you find some acorns and you manage to protect them from mice and voles and things, they'll probably start growing the next spring. Whereas something like hawthorn, which is pictured here, is a bit more tricky. You've got to remove the berry from around the seed, which is can be a little bit fiddly. And then it won't germinate the spring after. It will normally take 2 winters for stratification before the seed starts growing. So there's all these different kind of guidance on the different species collected together in this one guide, which is available. You can buy a hard copy from the Tree Council, but it's also available free to download online as well. Next slide, please. I mentioned CTNs often run in schools. So if you're looking to get young people involved in tree growing, there's a fantastic guide here. It's the Hampshire Forest Partnership and the Tree Council have developed this guide, Young Tree Growers Guide, which is designed to inspire and engage Key Stage 2 children and their families about growing young trees from seed. And there's also lots of activities about planting and aftercare. So even if you're not looking at growing trees from seed directly, if you're doing kind of activities with your young people around planting, this is a great place to look as well for some resources all linked to the curriculum. Next slide, please. Also, as part of the Tree Growers Guide, there's lots of videos on how to, so seed collecting, bricking out, potting on, setting up nursery, all sorts of different videos if you prefer to learn through watching. And there's also lots of case studies as well from different community tree nurseries around the country. And this includes the Tree Musketeers, which are in Hackney. So this is a picture of their nursery on the right. And they're a fantastic nursery growing lots of larger trees for street planting around Hackney, and doing lots of aftercare too. And they've actually got tours on as part of the Urban Tree Festival on the 14th, 16th and 17th of May. So if you are about in the area, it's worth definitely having a look and seeing if there's any availability left for those tours, because it's a really inspiring place to visit. Next slide, please. So there's increasing numbers of pests and diseases impacting the UK's trees. So if you are thinking of starting to grow trees, it's important to consider how to protect trees from these pests and diseases. So there's lots of simple actions you can take to reduce the risk of spreading. For example, using boot washes, cleaning equipment. It's also sometimes things that you decide not to do. So for example, if you've been offered a lot of trees and you don't know where they're from exactly, or you don't know kind of the history of the site, you might decide you don't want to accept them into your nursery, where then any pest or diseases might be spread to other trees, which then get distributed around. Or it could be that, yeah, you think about kind of simple things like if you're going on holiday, maybe don't go and collect a load of seed and bring that back to grow here. Apart from everything else, it would be illegal. So yeah, just kind of thinking through these things a little bit is quite important. It's also good to do record keeping. So if you can keep records of where you collect seed, then track that within the nursery and keep notes of where those trees go out to too. Then if there is ever an outbreak, that can be tracked back. It's also really nice. So we've set up a small nursery in Norfolk, and it's really nice to be able to tell people, oh, this, you're getting these trees and the seed clue was collected from this particular place, which is fairly local and they might know of it. So it's really nice to kind of have that tracking of provenance anyway. Also really good to do plant health checks regularly in the nursery. And also when you're collecting seed, have a look before you collect to see if the trees are looking healthy around that site. So again, there's lots of guidance available on the Tree Growers Guide website around all these elements of pests and diseases, and also on understanding the regulations. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, a lot of people want to grow trees and are doing it all over the country in different ways and by different means. I hope some of you might be inspired to do the same. So yeah, have a look at the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative and find your local CTN. Have a look at the Tree Growers Guide and pick a tree, have a go at growing it yourself. And also just to say, even if you don't want to get growing yourself, if you are buying trees, it's worth considering whether you can buy them from your local community tree nursery to help support them. Great, and that's all from me.
Emma, and thanks everybody else. That was really great. So if I could invite all of the project officers back in, and we'll go through some of your questions. Thanks very much for your patience, those who have been asking questions, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. I think this is one kind of for all three really, but from James in Herefordshire, like how have the local authorities resourced to support this work into the various tree schemes and everything? Was it local authority funded or was it external? So yeah, if any of you could jump in and explain how the project worked in your local authority, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we're lucky that the project's been funded through the Shared Outcomes Fund, so through Treasury. So we've had funding for that through the different local authorities to fund a project officer position and also for capital funding too. So I'm quite lucky. I just work full time on the project.
And so he's got a follow-up question as well of how they fit into the tree teams at the local authorities. Sophie, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I suppose we're quite interesting. We're a district council, so we're quite a lot smaller than the county council, so we don't have a tree team. I sit within the environment team, so the other members of my team, we've got someone working on climate change, someone kind of a wildlife officer, a biodiversity officer, etc. So yeah, there's just me in CDC. We have a tree officer who works in planning, but yeah, it's just the two of us really that work on trees.
And then we've got a question from Naomi about Miyawaki. So Louise, can I bring you in to answer that? She'd like to know a little bit more about what the comparison planting methodology was that was described over the Miyawaki methodology, but also she was wondering whether we did any analysis of soil contaminants before we started. And did we consider whether there was more contaminants in the area aside to the control site?
Okay, so the comparison method was each local authority's typical planting method. So we would do 1 tree per square metre, no soil aeration. We would mulch if that's what the local authority usually does. So in Kent, we don't usually do that, whereas some of the others did. So there was that. We watered it the same amount as the Miyawaki side, and I think that was it. Yeah, so no soil and no additives to the soil either. And the second question, what was the second question?
It was whether we did any
soil
testing.
Yeah, so we took before soil samples and now we've taken after soil samples, and they've been analysed for total carbon, total nitrogen content, pH, heavy metals. But the before ones, we only took one from the site, so we didn't compare the control and the Miyawaki, but we are comparing it for the after samples, if that makes sense.
We've just got another question that's come in about Miyawaki, so I might as well stick with you, Louise. And it was, what trees and shrubs did we use in the Miyawaki plots?
Okay, we used about 30 different native species, so I'm not gonna name them all, but I could probably send you a list if you want. But we tried to use ones that were native and suitable for that specific area, but we also wanted to use ones that are not very common anymore or that are locally extinct. So we looked at historic pollen core data, which you can find online, which identified some species that are not very common to the area anymore, but that used to be. And that's why your potential natural vegetation survey is really important, because you don't just want to plant what you can see around you now. You want to plant what should be there.
Thanks, Louise. And we've got a question from James on community orchards, so I'll hand over to Sophie for that. So he wants to know how has the more specialist management requirements, like tools and knowledge and skills of community orchards, been supported, and how will continuity of that be secured?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because it's really, really important, because it's obviously not, particularly for a community orchard where you need to prune, you need to maintain it. So yes, it's not just about the planting. So what we've been doing in Chichester particularly is we've been linking up new and existing community orchards, and we've found that to be really beneficial. So we've got a couple of really well-established community orchards in Chichester. And they've used organisations such as the Brighton Permaculture Trust, and there's an amazing bloke, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, that's actually come to Chichester and done pruning tutorials and that kind of thing. And now what's happening is the established community orchards are running their own pruning tutorials that you can go along to their community orchard and learn. So that's been really, really important. In July, we're having a community orchard day where we're bringing together all the community orchards, new and established, in Chichester, to kind of have a learning day. So we're doing things like that, linking up new and existing, which I'm hoping is going to help.
Sophie? And a question on community tree nurseries. So Emma, what level of involvement or support have CTNs generally had from their local authorities?
So we've been mainly just offering the grant funding. I say that, but then there has been like a project officer to support with that. And Forest Research evaluated the grants that we offered, and they did find that a lot of community tree nurseries said that kind of hand-holding support from the project officer was really important, as well as just the money. So yeah, and I'm not aware of any through the project where we've directly helped with land, but that is something that's really important to community tree nurseries normally, to find some free land or with peppercorn rent. And I know of others, like I mentioned the Tree Musketeers in Hackney, and they always used to have land for free from the local authority. So yeah, it can be a really important element.
Louise, we'll go back to you. There's a couple more questions about Miyawaki. So the first one was, did we survey any of the sites before for precious acid grassland and other valuable flora before planting? And yeah, I'll let you answer that one and then I'll come back to the other one.
Okay. So every single site where we wanted to plant, we surveyed first to make sure there was no designations. We also surveyed for underground utilities, and we worked with in Kent, all of our sites are actually owned by the district, so we worked with the district council to make sure that they were suitable for planting. And then that helped us narrow down our list of sites into a final smaller list of those we wanted to focus on.
And the other question is from Kevin. He wants to know, would we ever be interested to experiment with a Miyawaki style planting of a community orchard?
That sounds very interesting. I think I have actually heard of examples where they have put fruit trees into Miyawakis, but the kind of main aim of it is to recreate like a natural woodland mix, but there's no reason why you couldn't use the elements of the methodology to plant an orchard, if that makes sense.
Sure. And so there's one more question here about the Miyawaki, which I think it's worth answering. It's what would be the key outcomes and metrics 10 or 20 years from now that we would want to look at to evaluate whether Miyawaki or standard method was more effective in the long run?
I'm not really sure how to answer that question. So what metrics would we be looking at in 20 years from now? I suppose I'm not really sure. I mean, we're currently looking at survival and the wider biodiversity, and we are doing a life cycle analysis of the plots. I suppose it would be interesting to find out what the ongoing maintenance is required for Miyawaki in such a public area, and what cost implications that has. But yeah, unfortunately, the project isn't that long, so I'm not sure what we'd be looking into that far in the future, unfortunately.
Thanks, Louise. Right, we're gonna have to wrap up the Q&A there as we're a little bit over time already. Thank you to all of our project officers who've shared their experience of working on the project. Thank you everybody for coming. And thanks to Paul and Sarah from the Urban Tree Festival for organising this wonderful series of events. And to anybody who isn't aware and who's maybe come to this straight through the Tree Council, for the next week, there's a whole load of events, both online and in person, going on across the UK. So just head over to urbantreefestival.org. And you can check out the whole package. And we'll share after this a link to the recording of the webinar and any of the links that have been talked about in today's session, as well as we'll try and answer any of those questions that have come through that we haven't actually been able to get around to today. So yeah, thanks everybody and enjoy the rest of your Monday.